to come sit up at the table, please? So, my name is Molly Wasco. I'm a faculty over in the Collab School of Business, and I started with the CTSA about 8 years ago. And so my area of expertise is organizational innovation and knowledge creating companies. And so when I came to campus, I was looking for research opportunities, and I came across this organization called the CTSA. And the mission of the CTSA is really to find better ways to accelerate our science from the labs into real discoveries in the communities. And I thought, well, what a great opportunity. I know a lot about how to transfer knowledge across boundaries. I should come over here and meet these folks and actually do some studies. How do we accelerate science? So I came over, and the PI at the time was pretty interested in my research, but then she actually said, well, do you know how to do a strategic plan? I said, yeah, I can do a strategic plan. And so I ended up actually being part of the CTSA executive committee, doing things like strategy and research around how do we make this a better organization. And so just to give you guys an idea, this is meant to be a conversation. So I learned just as much from working with you guys, and it's not me like lecturing to you this is the right thing to do. As a matter of fact, none of what you're about to hear is formally sanctioned by the CTSA. These are just my observations over years. So this is not what the CTSA thinks is translational thinking. This is not all the appropriate definitions. This is just sharing with you guys some insights about working with the CTSA over a few years. So there are three things I want to talk about today. So the first is, why does translational science actually matter? And, I think it's a really good question. So here we have this center, we're doing all of this work, but why does it matter? Why do we get up every morning and come to work in this, section of translational thinking? And then, of course, to actually be able to answer this question, we have to understand, well, what is a translational thinker? How do we become a translational thinker? And then, of course, I want to talk about, and how could this have an impact on your science going forward? So one of the questions I'm fascinated with is this idea of how come some organizations are really good at innovations and other organizations aren't. And so if you look at the Fortune 500, since the year 2000, 50% of those organizations no longer exist. And so just in 18 years, we have seen very, very good organizations actually cease to exist because they were unable to innovate. And so this is not my model. This is actually a model from a very, very smart organizational research named Simon Sinek. And he talks about, organizations, you have to do three things. First, most organizations are really good about saying what they do. This is what they do. Most people in an organization can actually articulate this. And so for us, what do we do? Well, we're an academic medical center. We create knowledge. And so, but fewer organizations are actually able to articulate how they do it. And so for us, well, how do we do this? How do we do what we do? Well, we do it through teaching, through research, through service. I mean, most of our annual evaluations have these three components. But very few organizations can actually articulate why do they do it. All right, so we're an academic medical center as well as an institute of higher education. How do we do it? We teach students, we get grants, we perform service in our communities. Why do we do it? Well, because we want more students to come so we can generate more revenue. We want to increase our research expenditures. We want to grow. So, hey, come join UAB. I don't know. That's not very compelling to me. So what really great organizations are able to do is they're able to start with why. Why do we do what we do? So do you guys get up every morning to generate more tuition dollars for this university?
Yeah, what's the pay tuition?
So what do? We do science in our labs. How do we do it? We apply for grants from NIH and other funding agencies. Why do we do it? Because I got to pay my paycheck and I got to keep my lab running. So we've got to come up with a better way of talking about why we do what we do. And so why do we do what we do? Is because we want to eradicate the diseases that plague us out. Why do we do it? Because we want to advance knowledge and help the next generation. How do we do it? We do it through teaching, research, and service. What are we? We're an academic medical center. Now do you want to join us? When people are able to emotionally attach to why your organization does what it does, then it's going to want to be a part of it. And so really good organizations that are truly successful about making a connection to their stakeholders, always start with why. All right, which brings us to, well, translational science. What is translational science? I mean, most people can articulate what it is, right? What is it? Even the faculty can kick in, or the senior faculty, sorry. What is translational science? This was not meant to be a trick question at 8 in the morning. Well, this is what it is, right? So we divide our scientific discoveries basically along the spectrum, where we have basic scientific discovery, then it goes to clinical insights, implications for practice, implications for population health, and prove. And we call these different phases T's, right? So what is the appropriate vocabulary for this? Mike, help me out here. So scientists work within a specific T or across T's, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm a T2 scientist. I hear this a lot. And so it's actually embedded. We understand this concept. Translational science, though, is how do I get an idea from T1 to actually cross that boundary over to T2? And so, what we're trying to do is how do we accelerate this pipeline to get it from a basic discovery out into the world? That is what translational science is. All right, how do we do that?
We create programs, we do research activities, we teach, we evaluate, and all of the things that an academic maker-center does.
Oh yes, we have this, we know how we do this, right? That's what the CTSA is. So if you've ever been to the CTSA website, well, this is how we do it. We provide grant help. We have a library where you can come and look up other people's grants as a model. We give funding opportunities, pilots. We do panels and projects for people. We have, support for biostats and study design, clinical services. We have access to core facilities. We can do research data requests, informatics. We have things like mini sabbaticals, drug discovery. So we know how to do translational science. These are the things, these are the activities that we believe help to actually accelerate knowledge across the spectrum. All right, so looking at this, you know what? So that may be great. So if you look at actually what we do and how we do it, that we're very good at this side, right? So how to actually generate knowledge, discoveries, new innovations. Well, I come from the business school, right? I come from a different perspective. Just because we get another R01, just because we have 20 new publications, just because we have a scientific discovery, there is a huge gap getting from that innovation to actually an impact in our communities. Do you know who reads scholarly journals? People just like you. Yes, so there's this huge gap. And so part of what I've been doing for the past couple of years with the CCTS is how do we help bridge this gap? How do we help our academic researchers actually think about, if I have an innovation, how am I going to translate that idea off of campus and into the community, and the people for whom we are trying to serve? And so I started working with this program called ICorps. So ICorps, its Innovation Corps, is a program that was started by the NSF. And so in 2012, NSF went to Congress and said, you need to give us more money. And Congress said, why? Why should we give you more money? What have you done with the $7 billion we give you already? And so they said, well, we do all these great discoveries. But the congressman wanted to know, what has been that impact of your discoveries in my community? And so when they went and they actually looked through the portfolio, and by the way, 5% of our research funding actually has to go towards commercializing inventions through the SBIR's TTR program. So they go through this portfolio of all their SBIRs, and guess what they find out? We are creating a bunch of stuff that nobody wants. There was practically no commercial value in this entire portfolio of what NSF was funding. And so they went to Stanford, talked to some really smart people, and said, we need to develop a program to help us understand what's the commercial potential while we're doing our research. And so ICorps has been incredibly successful. So we've trained over 1,000 teams, and a third of those teams have actually gone on to create companies. So the success rate is far greater through ICorps than it is in just venture funding with Silicon Valley. So other agencies have started paying attention, including NIH. And so you can see the $30 billion that NIH has, that budget dwarfs NSF. And so people like me, we see this as kind of like R&D investments, right? If I have $30 billion that I'm investing in R&D and nothing is being spun out, that's a problem. And so NIH right now, they have a program where if you are currently funded by an SBIR, then you can go through an ICorps program with one of the NSF national teams. And so, you know, at least it's an attempt for things that they've already funded to go through the program. And so 2 years ago, I actually was part of the cohort, of the SBIR cohort, and we had about 30 different teams there, from therapeutics, devices, diagnostics. And at the end of the program, it was very clear about 60% of these are already companies. They have nothing of value to real people. They do not have companies. So it was shocking to me that we need to start much sooner in the pipeline and prevent people from starting companies if they don't have ideas that actually are going to, you know, resonate with the community. So we've started an ICorps program here locally. It's a regional, and it's pre-SBIR. And so, you know, we've learned a lot. So you guys do research in life sciences. We do research in how do startups be successful, and we've learned a lot. We used to think that, okay, all you needed was a really smart team of people sitting in a lab, you know, and they just need a really cool idea. We dump a bunch of money on them, and then some time goes by, and all of a sudden this company emerges. That is not how it works. And so the big difference between a startup and a company is that a startup is in search mode. They're trying to discover something we call a business model. Companies already have a business model, and they're executing. So when you look at what makes a startup successful, it's a completely different set of processes. So that's what we are trying to teach as part of the ICorps program. And it starts with, actually, I'm going to give you the case of one of the teams. So this is David Allen. He is actually a researcher down at Auburn University. Really, really cool idea. So when they applied to ICorps, it was theranostics, nanocomposites, self-assembling nanosystems, right? That's got to be cool technology. I mean, those are a bunch of words that I know nothing about. So we start with a very simple premise. The first thing our teams have to do is they have to come up with something called a business thesis. Who is your customer or stakeholder or beneficiary? What is your product, and why do they care? And so, you know, it's very interesting. So who is my customer? Their version 1.0 was an MRI center. What was their product? Is they actually were working with MRI contrast agents. And then why do they care? Because ours are better. So that's you know, at least they could get those three things, right? So first, though, MRI centers are not customers, they're buildings. And so you have to dig down a little deeper. Who is the person in that building that really cares about what you do? And they weren't really sure. They had it, I think it's going to be the radiologist. And, you know, why do they care? Well, what does better mean? Does that mean cheaper? Does that mean higher quality? Does that mean, what does that mean? And so they said, well, higher quality images. So they came up with radiologists want contrast agents that produce higher quality images. that is a set of hypotheses that they can go test, isn't it? So as long as you are sitting in your lab and talking to other people just like you have a set of hypotheses. You have no idea if that's true or not until you actually get out into the world, collect data, and actually see if that's true. So the second thing that we do in ICorps is we use this template. It's a very simple one-pager, and it's called a business model canvas. And what a business model is, it just helps you define how do you create, deliver, and capture value. And so how do you create value? That's back to your business thesis. How do you actually deliver it? How would you get that into the hands of a radiologist? And then how do you capture? What's going to be the revenue that's going to sustain this organization? So it seems pretty simple. I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be great. People are going to love it. Well, this is where the real aha moment came from. So by collecting data, you actually have to get out of your lab. And you have to go talk to people. You have to talk to the people who you think are going to be your customers. Well, how many scientists like doing that? Oh my gosh. I mean, as soon as we said the expectation is that you're going to talk to 30 people, they're like, I'm too busy executing. I don't have time to go talk to people. And so I was really shocked at just how uneasy people were about actually going and talking to other people. But, you know, this group was actually, they're pretty outgoing. They drank the Kool-Aid. They said, we're here. We might as well go through with this and do this crazy stuff that Molly says. So he actually has 2 PhDs in his lab. They are doing their thesis on this work. They go talk to 30 radiologists. What do you think they discovered? So they did about 20 interviews, and they came back to class, and they're like this. They're like, you know what, Molly? When we talk to radiologists, they don't care about this problem. They think the quality of the images are good enough, that they don't see the value of actually creating higher quality images. And so, you know, we don't ask them, you know, when you do an interview, you don't say, hey, here's my MRI contrast agent, want to buy it? That's selling. We ask them to actually go discover stuff. So what is important to you? What keeps you up at night? What do you love about your job? What do you hate about your job? If you could do something different, what would that look like? So it's a journey of discovery. And, you know, when you approach people and ask them about what they do, it's actually a pretty fun conversation. Selling sucks. I mean, it's like where you feel like a car salesman. So that's where people get uncomfortable. But if you're out there learning, and so what they learned from the radiologist was that the number one thing that kept them up at night was safety. So, and the comfort of the patients. So radiologists really want contrast agents that are safer for patients and aren't as painful for them. And so here are these guys, you know, they could have quit and said, well, customers are stupid, they don't know what they want. I'm going back to my lab because NIH said this was important work. You know, I've read it in an abstract that this is really critical, so I'm just going to go back and do what I do. Well, they decided if I'm going to spend my career actually doing research on a problem that is going to have impact, we're going to pivot. And so now their lab really focuses on how do we do things that are safer and more comfortable for patients, which they know because they've talked to people will have a real impact. And so what I have discovered through this process is, you know, do I think they're going to go start a company? No. Do I really care? No. But what the outcome that I was fascinated with was it really changed how they thought about science. And that's where I think the real value is for people. Just going through this process of trying to answer the question, why does what I do matter to people? And this ability to actually have conversations with people has transformed them. It's made them better scientists. So, you know, the aha insight to me. So translational science, what is it? Well, it's knowledge transfer across the spectrum. How do we do it? Well, we've got all these neat little components in the CCTS like BIRD and biostats that you can come. But we have really been investing in, are we doing science right? So we want to make sure that we're doing science with rigor and reproducibility, But the outcome of ICorps for me was, are we actually doing the right science? And that is a very different kind of question. And so how do we get there? So how do we develop as scientists? How did we get to where we are now? So,
Can I ask you to pause just for a second? Would that be
Sure.
okay? Because thinking back to that picture and that story, I'm struck. Last year there was a symposium, and Paul Harris, who's at Vanderbilt, came and talked, and he's kind of the architect behind REDCap. I think a lot of folks are familiar with REDCap, and I'm struck because I think he organically followed that process. I don't know purposefully, but he showed pictures of him, thinking at a coffee. So I went down, had a cup of coffee, and asked somebody, what are your challenges? So that was the genesis of REDCap. So it's kind of cool to reflect back on his story and see how he followed the process. The question I was going to ask is, a lot of the folks here do work that is not a technology in terms of a nanoparticle or even a piece of software, as an innovation, but relies upon human resources. So just trying to reflect on the process. I'm going to things like, how Uber or Lyft, where you're not necessarily developing a device or a technology in terms of a, biological agent or reagent, but talking about human resources and meeting needs. So in terms of that process with ICorps, has it been applied to folks that are on that side of the spectrum, where their kind of technology or innovation is more a human resource or service, kind of thing than a true, biomedical or technological piece of software?
a tangible product. Absolutely. All right. So, in one of the examples I use, actually some teams, so it applies to health services. How are you going to change people's behavior? Well, I'm going to tell them, and it's going to make them healthier. So, you guys see me? Do you think I know I should work out and eat better? Yes, you've told me that. I get it. I totally get it. But getting from knowing what is good for me, and then maybe you'll tell me how. Okay, so here's, the exercise regimen and the diet you need to follow. But unless you can actually give me the value proposition that will drive me to change my behavior. And so when you think about the human resources, you guys are absolutely, well, I probably shouldn't say that word. It's really difficult. So if you want to change the way a physician gives care, do you know how freaking hard that is? You have a much better chance getting a patient to change their behavior. Or if you want to change the way a hospital system works, that's really hard too. And so the concepts behind ICorps, why would somebody change their behavior? You have to have a really good value proposition for that. And you have to understand it by talking to the people whose behavior you're trying to change, that you're trying to impact. So it could be a product, a technology, it could be a service, it could be a solution. But it still comes back to understanding what is the value proposition? Who's the customer? What are you going to deliver? And why do they care about it? When people change their behavior?
There's a lot in it for them.
But what do you think is the most, it's when it's a crisis, right? It's when they actually face somebody and says, you're going to change your behavior or you're going to die. And you're going to die pretty quickly. So, that's a pretty good value proposition. But it's this idea, with our science, if we're, going to impact people, we have to understand the drive of those people. Very good question.
I have a follow-up question. I'm going to apologize. It may sound snarky, and I promise it's not meant to, right? But we're sort of alluding to incentives and sustainable behavioral change. And, that slide has, the right science. But what fraction of this is, I think researchers actually sort of start out asking questions that are, I think they deal with the right science, and somewhere along the way, they're forced to morph due to RFAs and reviewer comments and all of these other things. And the end product, there's such a disconnect from the idea they started out with also that none of us really talk about.
Absolutely true. So, but recognizing and understanding that as well. So actually, this is the story of the scientist. So you come into this field, you're super excited, you're going to, eradicate disease, right? So you're going to pick somewhere in this translational spectrum. It probably has a lot to do with whoever your mentor is or where you end up going. And just think of the way we train you. So we help you become very, very deep thinkers within your science. So we actually kind of start dividing you up into your little T spaces, and you start working in your lab, and then we encourage you to become even deeper thinkers. And so you go further and further down into your science, and then eventually we get to the point where we have a bunch of silos, where everybody, is very comfortable in their little community within their tribes. You speak the same language, and you share ideas amongst each other, which is fabulous. That's how we train scientists. But then it gets you to the point where what are you paying attention to? You're paying attention to other people speaking your language. You're paying attention to what your comments are on your reviews, and you get deeper and deeper, or what's in the abstracts of PubMed. And so we developed this practice of, all I have to do is convince a review team that what I'm doing is relevant. And that is the reality we live in. However, if you want to look at, and it becomes part of our identity. Hi, I'm a fill-in-the-blank scientist. That's who we are. But what happens is by developing these own communities and specialized languages, we lose the ability to actually share ideas. So as long as you're talking within your tribe, it's very hard to come up with new ideas, new breakthroughs, because, you do incremental things because you can see little advances, but it's really, really hard to come up with a new innovation because you're not getting new information into your tribe that really can help you discover some kind of aha moment. So, here's a joke. So here we go. A doctor, a lawyer, and an engineer walk into a bar. And they say, hi, I'm a doctor, fill in the blank. And do they have a conversation? No. I mean, let's face it, engineers are just annoying, right? They're geeky, they don't know how to talk to people, they won't make eye contact. Lawyers are just obnoxious. They're trying to show off how much they know. And then doctors, of course, already know they know everything. So by having nothing in common, we even begin not even liking to talk to other people because we have a hard time relating. And so if you want to know what are the best predictors of knowledge transfer, if I can get an idea from me to Becky, that here are the predictors. So this is, what our research shows. First of all, you need to know people. So the likelihood of you getting an idea comes from who you know. So knowledge transfers through these types of relationships and conversations. The second thing, you need to know who knows what. So if you need to seek a piece of knowledge or an idea, or you have to actually, well, I know Mike is an expert in this area. So not only is it who you know, but understanding what their area of expertise is helps facilitate. Having a shared language, so you have to be able to actually talk in a way that makes sense. So, I have to know a little bit about engineering. If Mike's an engineer, he needs to know a little bit about law, or we need to take some time to develop that common language. Availability. This is huge. People have to make time available to be willing to go talk to other people. This is fabulous. Just coming and showing up for a meeting on Friday mornings, making yourselves available, is a great predictor of whether or not you'll come up with a new idea because you're embedding yourself in a new flow of knowledge, meeting new people. And then interest, curiosity. So, you have to actually try and listen to what people are saying, which takes a lot of effort. Listening is really, really hard. How many of you guys teach in a class? How hard is it to get those guys to listen? I mean, it takes a lot of work. So, I love working with faculty. So they complain about the students, they're not engaged, they're on their phones, they're, asleep. Have you ever looked around a faculty meeting? Seriously. So the behaviors that we complain about the students are the exact same behaviors that we still have when we're no better. All right, and so when you look at the best predictors of knowledge transfer, It's really this idea of who you're adjacent to and talking to and how people are connected. And so, Mike and I were talking about this. It's this idea of how do we help develop these T-shaped scientists? So, people that can look this way, people that can look this way, and actually have a conversation. And so knowledge exchange actually occurs. So this idea of a T-shaped scientist, that they're very deeply rooted in their scientific knowledge. Yes, absolutely, that is a must. But also this capability to be able to talk to people on different ends, to their right and to their left, and be able to listen to them and bring in new ideas and understand, who knows what. So this idea of a T-shaped scientist kind of became this foundation of this is what a translational thinker is really about. And so, of course, here I have this hypothesis, right? I think, going through something like ICorps and getting out of the lab and going and learning new knowledge brings new insights. But how do you actually prove this? And so, I get a lot of pushback. Well, I think, it helps become, people develop into translational thinkers. And then I go, well, what's a translational thinker? And so I don't really know what a translational thinker is, but I know a guy who I think is one. And so this is a guy, his name is Lucio Mio. He's part of the CTS, and I, believe it or not, actually love going to our CTS meetings where a bunch of people actually come because I get to talk to this guy. I mean, it's just so enjoyable to have him around. So we were at one of our, meetings where we have to get all this stuff done. And I'm standing there with Lucio and another very senior, very well-known scientist. And the three of us are having a conversation. And the senior scientist could have been speaking French. I mean, is just making such, talking about the science that they're doing, using words like ApoB, mechanism, this, and I'm just going, okay. But then Lucio says, this is what he's talking about. He's talking about the transfer of blah, 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 blah. And he literally is standing there like a translator. So this idea of translation. And I thought, all right, now this is what a translational thinker is. Somebody that is willing to do that and someone that can do that. So what are these characteristics? All right, first of all, I believe a translational thinker is human-centered. I believe problems are felt by people. And so understanding the people that we're actually developing solutions for is a component. A lot of times in our science, we get so focused on, like, what is the science and the scientific problem that we lose sight of who are the actual people. And so to what extent do we actually have empathy for the people that we're desiring to help? So I was working with one of our academic researchers, and she's one of the most lovely people. She had this beautiful grant about how she was going to help inner city pregnant moms, better deal with this idea of teen pregnancy. And so I thought, this is really good. So how many have you talked to? 0. I said, all right, let's go find some. Let's go talk to them. And so even though, she had done tons of research and had a beautiful abstract about all of the important things that this work would produce, that she had never actually walked in the shoes of one of these people, met them personally, figured out what their challenges are. And so when you think about, all right, the problems we're trying to solve, have you experienced it or at least had empathy with the people that you're trying to solve? So problems are always human-centered. They're perceived by people. All right, the next thing is radical collaboration. The problems that we face are so incredibly difficult that we by ourselves are not going to be able to tackle them. We have to be able to collaborate with other people. But once again, remember the lawyer, the doctor, the engineer, collaboration is really annoying and it takes a lot of time. We are far too busy executing our experiments to engage in any type of radical collaboration, especially with annoying people like a biostatistician, right? So, but we have to be able to do this. We have to bring together teams of people with varied backgrounds. You know, and just something as simple as changing your vocabulary. I bet all of you guys within the last 24 hours have used 2 words that have defined your innovation ability. Yes, but. What do you say when you say yes, but? Yes, but biostatisticians are annoying. Yes, you know, I could come to this, but, oh my gosh, I don't have to get kids on the bus. I can sleep in. What happens with yes, but? What if you came to me with an idea and I said yes, but?
It means no.
It means no. No way, never. Will you ever bring an idea to me again? Probably not. So, you know, radical collaboration, just change 2 words in your vocabulary. Yes, and. So, you know, so what if it's a crazy idea? Who cares? Just say yes, and see where it goes. It could go nowhere, but you'd have a lot of fun talking about it anyway. So, yes, and I would love to have a huge swimming pool in the middle of campus. Yes, and we could have a block party there. Yes, and, you know, yeah, it's going to be crazy, but it may lead to some kind of insight where yes, but will just shut down your conversation. All right, multilingual. So this is the idea of the T. So perspective taking, becoming very fluent in the language of our own communities. That's essential. That's essential to what we do, how we fund our science. But this idea of perspective taking, being able to appreciate the perspective of another person. So perspective making within our communities, perspective taking. And to be able to do this, we actually have to get outside of our box. We have to force ourselves, even though it's much easier to stay in our lab, to go out and actually talk to some other people, get some other insights. You know, when we talk to people about, well, why don't you come to the CCTS and use a bird or a panel? What do you think the reason is? Do you know it's going to be helpful? Yes? Because you're too busy executing. So we're too busy, well, I'm just going to like get it up to the deadline. I don't have time to get in a review. So we have to try and change. Here's a little secret. So writing a grant takes about, what, 100 hours. You can decide if you want to start that 100 hours in January or in June. But it still takes the same amount of time. And so it's interesting to me, it's very hard to actually motivate ourselves to do it until we're up against that deadline. But the secret is, you know, it's going to take the same amount of time. You just get to choose which bucket you're going to put it in. So, you know, leave time for yourself to actually get out of your box and get perspectives from other people. All right, insatiably curious. You actually have to be willing to go listen to other people and ask why. You know, just the 3-year-old. Even if you know the answer, be willing to be curious about the perspective of another. And people enjoy, you know, having an opportunity to talk about what they do. So the problem with this is what happens if you actually go to somebody and ask them why or are curious. Why do we do this? It's because it makes us look stupid, doesn't it? Well, I'm never going to admit that I don't know something. My job is to be the smartest person in the room. So I'm never going to go up to Mike and say, oh, tell me more about that. Oh, I want to understand that. That means I'm stupid, right? And part of what our training is never to admit you don't know something. But we have to change that mindset if we're going to be curious and learn. Oh, actually, I want to go back to this one. So, you know, I was at the ACTS conference where, you know, a bunch of us went up to DC. We had a really nice dinner. I encourage you to go. And I sat next to a pretty young trainee She was actually a physician, and now she wants to be a scientist. And so I was asking her why. Tell me about that. And I was telling her about my ideas on translational thinking. And, how do you experience this? And this was a key thing to her. It's not just being curious and willing to listen, but actually having real respect for what other people are doing. This idea of mutual respect. And if we're going to share ideas with each other, it's got to be with people we trust, that aren't going to think we're stupid or, that are going to be interested. And so I think this is a huge component of it as well, is, one of the most important gifts you can give another person is time, availability, and respect. And that's what really encourages people to exchange ideas. Embrace experimentation. So failure is not a 4-letter F word. So fail is actually how we learn how to do things. So how do you just get stuff out there quickly, get feedback, and then see if it's going to work, and then change it? So another thing, we have a tendency, I'm going to sit in my office, I'm going to work on this PowerPoint presentation until it's perfect. Then I'm going to launch it into the world, because I never want to get up here and look stupid in front of a group of people, right? But that forces us to actually, nothing's ever going to be perfect. And so you're going to end up spending a bunch of time on something, but until you get it out into the world and experiment and test, you don't know if it's going to work or not. So we need to think about, well, instead of just, waiting until something's perfect, months and months go by, I never want to show it to anybody because I'm afraid I'm going to look stupid. Go ahead and get it out there. Get feedback quickly, and then fix and go. So this idea of very fast experimentation, getting it out there in front of other people and getting feedback. And so, one way to do this is just change your vocabulary. So this is just version 1.0 of this presentation. This is a prototype. This is something I'm working on. If you change the way you talk about things, then it's much easier to get feedback on them. So, but this is really, really hard. So how many of you guys have gotten reviews back that were not good? So how does that feel? Bad. Why? You do a lot of hard work, and then you feel like, well, so I'm a failure. This was so much hard work. And you go home, you go to bed, you pull the covers over your head, and you stay there. And then you go through the bitter phase. Well, these people are too stupid to understand what I'm doing. And then, after a month or two goes by, the hurt could be over enough or healed enough that you could actually pull that back out. All right, let me see. So here is a cup of coffee, right? How many of you guys love coffee? I think coffee sucks. So I don't want your coffee. Have I just attacked her? Have I called her a bad person? A failure? No, I'm talking about the coffee. It is completely separate from her as a human being. So is your research. The problem is our research becomes our baby, and we present our baby to the world. And your baby is fat and ugly and stupid and it's not going anywhere. And so we feel like that person has just given us feedback about us. If you can actually separate yourself, that I'm getting feedback on the ideas of my science, it has nothing to do with me personally. You're going to be much more open to getting feedback and learning. But boy, I got to tell you, it's hard. I get paper reviews back. Oh, jeez. I get student evaluations. And it's, but separating, they're not talking about me. They're talking about the approach to the class, which is a separate thing. So if you can have that distance, try and think about that. It's just a cup of coffee.
So I think sometimes, right, so you're a human too, so sometimes it is personal, but one of the things, I went to this talk by this cardiologist who was a total jerk, but he said this brilliant thing, which was that you know, that as a trainee, you get this back and you feel like they're attacking you. And it's like, they're not attacking you. They don't know who you are. They might be attacking your mentor. Because, you know, I think it's something, and like, but it feels like a personal attack, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's attacking something else that's like not, it's sort of outside of you.
So, you know, do you recall how you started that story? The cardiologist, how did you describe him? He's a jerk. All right, so some people are just jerks. And if you get feedback that says, you know, nothing about your science, but is, oh, this is clearly a junior person that has no idea what's going on in the field, that person is just a jerk. And so you're allowed to ignore people. And, you know, think about it. I try to do this every time I provide a review. I say the research, the model, the data. I never try to talk about you or the researchers, but keep it focused on the science. But you're right. You're going to come across people who are jerks, and you just have to kind of get over, we just have really thick skins.
How do you counsel people? So the one exception that I think could apply here is when somebody's writing a K or a career development award, and you really pour your heart and soul. It's not just your science, but it is about the candidate and who you are. And I think that, and so many of the people here probably are at that stage, and I think then it is even harder to get that separation, because you really do feel like it's a reflection of you as a person they should invest in. And that, I think, is a little harder to put distance between. So how do you tell people to handle that?
It is a mindset. And so, you know, you use the phrase, with the K, they are judging you. They're not judging you. They don't know you. They're judging your research, and they're judging whether they think that research program that you're presenting is going to advance science. So based on the work you've done in the past, where, you know, the facilities and resources that you have, but once again, they're not, you know, but it is so, I agree, it's so hard. And, you know, it's one of the things with ICorps that when you actually go out into the world and ask people about what is the value of the thing that I'm doing, and people say, you know, I don't want it. But if what we typically do is I get defensive personally, and then I start actually saying mean things to the other person because they don't obviously appreciate it, and then it escalates. That person will never give me feedback ever again, will they? Because they're too embarrassed of hurting our relationship. And so, you know, if you take feedback personally and get defensive, you're shutting off feedback. So once again, how are new ideas created? Where do innovations come from? The transfer of knowledge. If you have just shut yourself down to receiving knowledge in, then it's going to be very hard for you to innovate. But once again, it's really hard to be able to do this. So I have just memorized a line, and my brain just does it. Thank you for that feedback. I appreciate it. You've given me a lot to think about. And I shut up. And that is the only way, you know, so how many of you guys have ever been with somebody you truly care about? So your spouse, your mom, somebody, and they had food in their teeth or a booger on their nose. Did you tell them? Good for you. Why, if you truly care about somebody and they're doing something that is damaging their reputation, their career, makes them look stupid, boy, I would like somebody to tell me, you know, I really would. But we're too afraid of hurting somebody's feelings to actually give them honest feedback. So it's interesting. How can you create a culture of honest feedback in your lab? How can you create a culture where your team can talk about the research and then you can walk out of that room with your relationships intact? This is a wonderful skill to be able to have. And I've only seen it in a couple of places. And, you know, it's interesting. So with ICorps, here's one of them. We're teaching, you know, with national instructors. These guys are so much smarter than me. I mean, it's kind of like the superstar, right? They get up there, the keynote speaker, oh my gosh, these guys are awesome. At the end of the day, they all sat down and they said, all right, what can we do better? And the person who was like the lowest in the hierarchy, she was the one that was the TA for the class, but she was sitting in the back of the room and could observe everything. And she's like, Edmund, when you did that part on this, you lost the audience. That was way too brutal. He's like, okay, good, thank you for that. And so they actually critiqued what they did right after they did it, and they had that and then we all went and had a beer. I mean, they were able to actually share this kind of feedback. If you can create that culture in your lab, that's going to be awesome. All right, bias towards action. Just go do something. I mean, we think things to death. Thinking is not actually putting ideas out there in the world, but it's fun to think. And it's fun to think with people in our labs, right? So we can just sit and talk about the coolest stuff, but actually go out and do something. So actually put it into action. All right, so we've talked about what is translational science. We've talked about how we do it, but we never came back and talked about why does it matter. Why does our organization exist?
If we're going to invest billions of taxpayer dollars in research, then it shouldn't just live in journals. It needs to get out because it can help people.
All right, because we're spending taxpayer money. Nah. Who's read the mission? Do you remember what it is?
I think it's for the mission of CCTS or the
Yeah.
university. Okay, I've read both. So I think it's to alleviate the burden of disease in the South and globally, or something like that.
So, exactly. So why do we do what we do? We believe we will eradicate disease. We believe that the work we do here every single day is going to relieve human suffering. We believe that we can cure cancer in the South. We believe we can, help people get fitter and do diet and have healthier lives. We believe that humans in our region deserve health and well-being. That's why we do it. And so regardless of where you are, and there are discoveries that you can make, and there are discoveries that you can make by sharing ideas across the spectrum. And so typically, our basic scientists are like, oh, you just want me to go talk to clinicians. I mean, they think it just goes one way. But it goes this way. How many of our clinicians run into crap every single day that they don't know how to solve and they're doing workarounds for it? How many of you guys have actually walked in the hospital and seen the amount of tape people just use? Seriously. And so a lot of insights come from these guys who are seeing human problems every single day. How many of them have ever walked into your lab and said, hey, I have seen this problem 30 times this week. Can you help me understand why? It goes both ways. From scientific discoveries to how do we improve human health to, oh my gosh, this is human dishealth. Can I actually engage in research to try and fix this? And so thinking about it going both ways. If clinicians see problems out in the world, how can we better understand the underlying mechanisms and get those ideas to flow back?
I'm sorry, I have a question, because back to this point of things living in online journals, because I fully believe that sometimes stuff we do is online dust in a journal, and it drives me insane, right? Academics citing one another is kind of useless. But some of these points to me are really important. I would hope if you ask all of us in here, we agree with them. Things like collaboration or, being able to talk to one another with a common language. But we have to be in a system or a place. We have to have the global infrastructure to do that. And if we only incentivize things like grant scores and authorship order and impact factor, that really disincentivizes some of those things. And so one of my best examples is when folks are talking about group collaboration and everyone needs to go up for promotion, who gets to be first and or last author, becomes an all-out fight, right? Because they all need it. And if you can only have one person, I've seen screaming matches over this, to the point where like HR was called in. I don't know that we have a system in place. And so I think most of us believe in this, but I don't understand how we implement it without a different global infrastructure.
I think just like any kind of environment, whether it's business, whether it's science, you have toxic groups and toxic people, and then you have places where it works well. And I think some of, especially as a person, and I mean, I know you don't always have a choice because it depends. Sometimes you're in a place and that's the person you need to work with. But to the extent that you have a choice, I think one of the things that's kept me sane in academics is trying to find people that I like to work with and continuing to work with those people. Not necessarily in a box, I mean across the spectrum, but if there's someone who's toxic and they're not a good team player, I suggest you try to be away from them. Like, I just don't
I mean, most of us are training in this room, so our like leverage there may be limited, I guess.
Yeah, right, I get it. But that's where you learn. You say, wow, this is a dysfunctional way that this is going on. There's got to be a better way. Because, I mean, I think people come up with solutions around things like authorship or things like, you know, but it takes a desire to do that. And so if there's a group where it's, or a situation where it's really not working well, I mean, if you can't change that within that dynamic, then you've learned something about what you don't like.
Having some more thoughts and just thinking about how does this happen, and I can think of examples where it's happened organically, and similar to Lucia, when you see it, you kind of know what it looks like, but to be able to say, can the CCTS or a department or division say these are the key ingredients, you know, it's kind of hard. So just trying to think about, I think a lot of the comments resonated with me in terms of being grounded in mutual trust and respect and able to have those difficult conversations and having a shared why to ground what you're doing. So at the end of the day, it's not necessarily about the grant or the authorship, but that also takes the realities of, well, without the grants and the papers, I don't have a job and I don't get promoted. So I think it's this culture, but it's interesting because I have seen examples where teams have emerged organically, and by having that shared value system and structure and collaborative spirit, it's helped overcome some of those demands that oftentimes force us back into our own world. You know, so it comes. I think it's a great question, and trying to think about, you know, are there a handful of examples even on the UAB campus where you say, let's take a deeper dive into this group, you know, seems to resemble what is the ideal, and trying to understand how did it form, how did it get started, was it, you know, what was the, you know, key pieces, was there some center that, it's those type of things. It's interesting, I mean, because, you know, at the end of the day, as much as I love these mission statements from everything else, my real experience, you know, and this is a reality that I've come to say I'm going to focus on my personal why is, it's about indirects. It's about, you know what I mean, like at the end of it, as much as we, you know, want to, and I think personally have to come back to, for me, it is about my why, and then the team I get to work with on a daily basis, but in the context of there are these competing, you know, demands and things.
And don't get me wrong, I've seen on the flip side where like leadership has come back and said, you know, like, great, we're willing to like recognize that you've all put in equal, you know, it doesn't matter authorship order or whatever, for example, we've understood that this is a very strong team and you've all put in equal effort or something. But I just, in my experience, more often than not, unfortunately, the incentives and the metrics that we use to gauge folks somewhat disincentivize one of these things, unfortunately, which is why I think they're harder to do.
Well, I mean, that view, and I don't, it sort of takes the view that it's sort of a zero-sum game, right? So that, you know, that there's one thing coming out of the collaboration. You know, I think if you go in from the beginning saying, okay, you know, we're going to try and do this many things, sort of thinking, and then like, you know, each person is going to take the lead on this part, you know, I think that it helps. That helps, right? So as opposed to saying like, this one person, you know, it's a collaboration, but this one person gets all the credit. You know, I think that there are ways to sort of proactively avert those things. I mean, they get ugly. To adjudicate some. So, you know, but you know, the solution, you know, that can be like, okay, this person gets this piece and this person gets that piece. You know, that there's some ways to work around that.
So there are lots of ways to work around that. Organizations have figured this out. And actually, another talk that I did last year was how to actually do research project management and how to avoid some of these conflicts by having processes in place. You know, but I love your question. And one of the things I struggle with is, you know, if we look across the career arc, which is another thing that we think about with the CCTS, that, you know, where should we be focusing our efforts? And so should it be the senior scientists that could change how they're doing things in their lab? The chances of that, sure, the ones we have sitting in the room that are already, you know, on the translational thinkers, or is my time better spent with you guys? And so for me, the reality is, right, heads down, knock the crap out, whatever you need to do to get tenure. And then you can pick your head up and then make some choices. But I truly believe that you guys are the future of the field. If it's not working the way it is now, you guys are the ones that will change this in 10 years. But once again, the only way people can change is to actually learn something new. If you don't learn how to do something differently, then you're just going to continue doing the same old thing. So once again, coming to forums like this, because, you know, I've worked with the CCTS for a long time, and I walk in and I'm like, why are you doing it this way? I mean, this isn't like crazy. This is, you are self-inflicting pain, people.
But you say yes and.
And I say, yes, and have you thought about doing it this way? And what's so much fun is they say, wow, of course we'd rather do it this way. We would rather to get rid of our pain and achieve our dreams and, you know, get things done better. So, but they haven't seen like a method that will help them do something better. And so you have to learn new things if you're going to change. But there is a reality out there. And the reality is you need this X, Y, and Z if you're going to keep your job. So that's what you have to do. How you do it and why you do it, you get to define. And that's the key for me. All right, so coming back to why. So who is the customer? That's what we ask in ICorps, but fill in the blank. Who is your stakeholder, your beneficiary? Who is, you know, the person with the problem you're trying to solve, your user? What is my product or service or innovation or breakthrough idea? And then can you actually talk about why do they care? Why does your user care about this problem? Taking somebody else's point of view. And so when you're out in the world and talking to people, so tell me about your research. And I actually pulled this from somebody's abstract. I work on mitochondrial DNA dams, and, you know, the acronyms just went farther from there. Bless your heart. So, if you have an opportunity to tell people about the cool things that you're doing, how do you open the conversation and not get a response like this? What does this mean in the South? This is basically yes, but in a much nicer way, right? All right, but here's the key. People don't care about your science. They could care less, other than the other people in your space working on things just like you. So if you can take your science and stick it in a box and stick the box under the bed and find a different way of talking about it in a way that resonates with people. All right, so, beneficiaries, customers, they don't care about your science. What people care about, things like, I want my jobs to be easier. I want less stress. I want my dreams achieved. I want to look better. I want to be fitter. I want my pain to go away. These are what people value. And so when you think about your science, can you translate that into why people value the outcomes of what you do? So let's start with why. And I'm not exactly sure I interpreted this abstract correctly, but I believe help people regain their mental health and well-being. That's pretty cool. So tell me more about that. Well, I do research at a university, and I get funds from NIH to be able to do these types of experiments. All right, well, tell me more. Well, I work with these little things called mitochondrial DNA. They're like little, and whatever a damp mechanism is, I don't know. But then, if you can connect with people with why you're doing, and then how you're doing, and then go into, all right, here are the specifics of the science, then it makes all, people will connect with what we do as scientists. So, which is, if we're going to get our ideas out into the world, people actually have to understand what we do and respect it. And it's a part of this translational, if we're going to go from innovation to impact. All right, so what do I want to leave you guys with? I want you to become great scientists, of course. But I want you to think about, can you be a T-shaped scientist? So can you actually think about, if I want new ideas to come to me, who do I know? Do I know the right people? Do I even know a biostatistician or somebody in informatics? Would I take them to lunch? Boy, wouldn't that be fun? Absolutely. Knowing what they know, developing a shared language so you can actually talk together, and making yourself available, like going to lunch, and then being truly interested in asking what they do. I mean, it is just fascinating when you truly try and sit down and understand people like Jim Semino. I mean, so Jim Semino is informatics, and he presents, and I'm so focused. And by the way, my focused face looks really angry. Just probably up there going, no, he hates me. He just hates me. But true interest and curiosity. Make sure that not only do you do science right, so rigor, reproducibility, all the right things. So if you're going to go through this experiment, make sure you're going to get the results that actually are publishable. But are you really working on science that matters? So are we doing the right science? So take some time, get out of your lab, actually go find the people you think you're solving for, and then just spend a day or two kind of understanding from their point of view. So it could be a physician, it could be a patient, it could be a nurse, it could actually go the other way. So if you're on this side of the spectrum, go spend a day in somebody's lab and see what they do. All right, envision the pathway to impact. In my opinion, we are not doing a good enough job if we stop here. We have got an innovation that stays on campus and doesn't actually reach the people we're solving for we've got to find a better way to actually go from innovation to impact. So when you think about, when you submit your K, what is going to be that pathway? So let's say you were insanely successful. You get a perfect score. You're funded. Everything goes perfectly. All of your little mouse models are just the perfect results. Then what? What would be the implication of that on human people, on real people? Can you think about that while you're writing your K? And actually, can you go verify that and bring that back into how you write your K? That is very compelling. And then always start with why. So why do you do what you do? Then how, and then what? And it makes such a huge difference in how you approach other people. And for me, it's really at this core of the idea of translational thinking and the idea of translation. All right, so thank you. I appreciate your time a great deal. And I appreciate your feedback. Once again, these are just my ideas that are in a presentation. So, trying to, it's version 1.0.
Great, thanks, Molly. So, thanks. We have time for questions and discussion.
Thank you for your presentation, so that's wonderful. The idea of talking to people, as you mentioned, is sometimes easy. If I pick up the phone and call Andrea or Mike or you or some of the people sitting here, because we know each other, we know a little bit of the work, and Something that is very helpful is if we understand why we're meeting, doing a little bit of the pre-work, but I would have no problem picking up the phone and saying, hey, what about this and so forth, because I trust we have a good communication line and so forth.
So can I just add something? If you only talk to people you know, they're going to lie to you because they want to keep the relationship. If you really want honest feedback on ideas, try to talk to people you don't know. And is it hard? Yes, incredibly hard. And so trying to get, maybe it's an introduction. So do you know anybody at another university working in this space? Or do you know anybody that can introduce me to this position? But keep that in mind. If you really want true and honest feedback, then you've got to go to people you don't know as well. So yes, and do both.
And I wasn't going to ask for feedback. I was going to do an exploratory field trip as you talk about getting the voice of the customer and so forth. Mm-hmm. My question to you in terms of advice for people is, when those conversations may not be sort of crystal clear or understanding, or I may not be interested in having feedback, I'm interested in learning, as you said. Yeah. Is there any particular sort of framing that you suggest now from the business literature, besides, sure, having an open mind, let's go with that listening mode and all of those, something that it's translatable to no matter what profession we talk to in terms of having a conversation?
So lots of good questions. So tell me about what you do. So, and try and get a story. So people, like talking about, tell me about the last time you ran into this. So tell me what keeps you up at night. Why? What is the implication of that? If you could do something differently, what would that look like? Why would you do it differently? And see if you can actually just, a couple of these open-ended questions to get someone to tell you a story. And then continue asking why. So, one of the great examples is, all right, so tell me about how you feel about health food. How do you feel about eating vegetables? What am I going to tell you? Oh, it's essential. Oh, yeah, I know all about eating healthy. What did you eat yesterday? So, tell me the last time that you picked this or this, and get them to actually talk about a story.
And I think, just think about the timing and, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to piggyback on that, but I think a little bit about what you're asking, and I find this to be a little bit difficult. It feels like everybody around here is so busy, and that you've got to almost have an agenda for your meeting. And you make a meeting with an assistant and they say, can I write down what this is going to be about? So the idea of going in and asking open-ended questions, I think you can get there, but I think the framing, so that you let somebody know I'm coming to find out, to learn more about your shop, or to learn more, so that they don't come in, they kind of know for that half hour or whatever that that's the plan. Because I do think there's such a pressure on time that setting that this is going to be loose and I just want you to talk for 30 minutes. And they know that going in, then it's a little bit less awkward, I think.
Well, and that's culture. Yeah. That's all about the culture. So, all right, Monday, when somebody wants some of your time, you're not going to say, where's the agenda? You're going to say, that sounds great. Why don't we go to Lucy's and have coffee? Or let's walk around campus for our 30 minutes. But we're the ones saying...
You can do that when you're like, but you can't always tell somebody else that they've got...
No, but you can start with you.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to mention, one of the things that the CCTS provides support for is something called a mini sabbatical. And I got to tell you, if there's another lab somewhere in this country that is doing something similar, take a week and go visit. So once again, when you think about, all right, how does knowledge transfer occur, who you know, who's available, but going and embedding yourself in another context and seeing how other things are done, it's fascinating. And those relationships that you create are going to be ways for you to actually exchange ideas far into your career. So I think it should be mandatory, personally.
Yeah, and I think other opportunities, and I think it's harder when you're earlier, speaking from my personal experience, it's harder when you're earlier in your career because you feel like sometimes you don't have the connection. Am I going to be well-received? You know what I mean? Just even whether it's someone on campus or someone in the community. And I think that's where there's opportunity, either through mentors, through centers, through other groups, to try to get a kind of warm introduction. So I could say for myself, I spent like the first 5 years head down getting myself established to then where you say, okay, now I can go visit Alabama Department of Public Health or visit this community agency. Whereas now, I think trying to say, is there someone that has a relationship that can, and I agree with you completely, even now in CCTS, to go and ask for an invitation to go to someone's turf, right? Oh, wait, I want to come to you and just ask, what do you do? Can you give me a tour? Can I meet your staff? What is your team? You know, and those type of relationships for me have led to some of, you know, even though you aren't going with an agenda or a project, lead to some of those long-standing collaborations that create new ideas that you didn't even think. But I think it's harder. I mean, again, from my personal experience, it's harder when you're at that kind of post-doc early career phase. But if you can do it and there's people that can help introduce you, if you haven't done it, I mean, it's so valuable.
Yeah, I want to come back to this too. So you cannot learn how to become a translational thinker by knowing what one is. And so, you know, all we did this morning was talk about here are some things that you can do to develop translational thinking skills. The only way to become a translational thinker is to behave like a translational thinker. The only way you're going to change your mindset is by forcing yourself to go have one of these, a different kind of experience. So you learn translational thinking by being a translational scientist, not by listening to a lecture. So, you know, this is one of the things we struggle with the CCTS. So how do we teach translational thinking? You know, I am just way out here. This is what it is. Mike talked about this design thinking exercise that we did that was really, you will do it because I'm making you. And then we're going to stop and reflect on what just happened. But you thought it was crazy. You're like, there's no, we even had people that walked in and heard what we were going to do, they left. This is not my bag. So you have to be willing to experience it. And then it'll start making sense.
Yeah, no, and concretely, so just trying to sometimes go to some concrete opportunities. Becky and I had a chance to go meet with, you know, Max Michael and Sean T. Allen in the Community Engagement Corps, and opportunities in terms of getting outside of your box and talking with different people. You know, so there's a group called One Great Community that includes a lot of folks, you know, community leaders, you know, CDO, elected officials, academicians, and they're very open to folks from our group going and kind of having an audience with this totally different group of kind of community engaged folks, and community engaged institute also that they've planned. So just trying to think about, are there other forums that are readily accessible through the CCTS that, you know, I think those are opportunities that we're looking to cultivate and create independent of, in your discipline specific area, going to whatever agency or, you know, stakeholder.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate the importance of mutual respect. And so, you know, it's very hard. I'm glad you guys went and talked to Max and Shanti's. But a lot of times we'll go into a meeting with an agenda. How can I get Max and Shanti's do things I want, not really appreciate the things that they're doing from their point of view? And so, you know, what I think about, you know, an elephant and a dog. So you really want a dog. You know, you want it to slip in the lap, and you want it to pet, and you have an elephant. And the elephant doesn't behave like a dog, and you get angry at the elephant. Whose fault is that? It's an obvious example. It's your fault. It's an elephant. You need to appreciate the elephant for what the elephant can do and bring to the table, and what the elephant loves. And so, you know, just, I go into meetings and I think, boy, I really wish that you would teach this stuff in your class, and I really wish you would teach it this way. When what I should be thinking is, that's an elephant. I'm a dog. This is the way I teach, and this is the way the elephant teaches. And my job is to understand the elephant's point of view, because, you know, they could have, what they're doing has significant meaning for them, and I could learn from them. We don't need more dogs. We need dogs and elephants to be able to better understand each other so we can share ideas.
I think too, thinking about Monica's first point,
in trying to translate, thinking about a thing like an MRI contrast or a heart patch, and then thinking about some more outcomes work that is squishier, that I think some folks might think, well, it's a different deal. But I really think if you can say why you're generating this data, if you can explain what might use the information that if you're doing a descriptive study, it's so much stronger if you can say, I spoke with these people and there's a real need to understand this, and they're planning on using it this way based on what we find. That is more compelling than just, I'm describing this cool thing. It's not, what do you think? Do you think that's true, that you would, as a reviewer, be more compelled if they describe what the data might be used for?
Absolutely. And in language that is clear. So remember Grandma, bless your heart? Can you explain it to Grandma? That's what you're going for. And, it's interesting. So even if you're here in basic science and you don't know how in the world this discovery is going to actually end up benefiting somebody, well, it is never going to leave your lab unless you find somebody a little farther down that really cares about what you're doing. And if you can talk to that, oh, by the way, I'm working on this. I think it may be relevant to your field. Oh, and what are you doing in your field where maybe I can do something that's relevant? So, it's this idea of even if you're here, someone's got to be really excited about what you're doing because it could be an insight leading somewhere else. Can you meet those people and talk to them?
So I think as like a follow-up to Drs. Estrada and Sherrington and the points that they were making, one of the things that I tried to do, and I'm curious what others think maybe too, but in those situations where I've had these sort of like amorphous things that I wanted out of something, is sometimes email folks, particularly when it's like big names, to say like, I just love to meet with someone in your group that has, maybe half a day to share with me where I can just follow them and sort of ask them questions. And then if possible, schedule like a 30-minute meeting with you. Because I found that it better informs my questions and I feel like I can use their time more judiciously. But I've also made a point to then like really send like a handwritten thank you card to someone who spent half of their day with me, for example. But I think that sometimes those things are hard, but you also, in some ways, actually get better insights from working with someone than if you're following them, you can ask them like while they're doing something, what's something actionable that like you wish could be implemented that hasn't been, or an easy fix or whatever, when you're like in their place and they're going through their day-to-day stuff. And then when you meet like down the line with whoever the big person is, like a CEO or the big name PI, to say like, oh, can you, talking about some of the barriers for implementing things like X, Y, and Z. And I found that sort of having both of those insights have been very helpful, but it also makes like, because I've sent a lot of cold emails in my life that surprisingly get a pretty high hit rate, but it makes sending those cold emails easier to say like, hey, I know that you're a very busy person. Given that, can I meet with like just someone? And then if possible, like you down the line, but no worries if not.
I just want to point out how brave that is. So what's the worst that can happen if you send an email asking for a meeting and they say, what? No. That's the worst that can happen. Are you dead? Are you in pain? Did it break your arm? No. I can promise you, you will never get a meeting with a person if you don't even ask. And no just means no. It's not a personal attack. For some reason, though, we are just even so afraid to take the step. And yes, open yourself up to experience. I mean, I can promise you 100% failure if you don't even actually try and send the email. But can you get to 50%, success rate? Sure. That means half of them are going to be no's, though. But that's okay.
Well, I think this speaks to your slide about the importance of kind of who you know being an important aspect of being a translational thinker, because I think being in spaces like this, or for me, talking to Monica about various things, I wouldn't, and it may sound idiotic, but I wouldn't know that people do that it's okay to do that people respond well to that. So it's something that I personally have come into partly because of being in this space. and knowing that that's something that is part of this process, right? Like it's a pretty important part of the process, I think.
So I'm going to challenge you. Yes, it's really difficult to get someone who's a senior person, but it is inexcusable for you guys not to spend a day with each other, leveraging these connections. So how many of you guys have said, hey, can I just shadow you for a day and see what you do? Do it. It'll be fun. It'll be a lot of fun.
Can I share you for a day?
Just another, maybe not a crazy, but just something I wanted to ask, I think piggybacking on the idea of being available, and it goes in the other direction. So I think Mark talked about kind of looking to kind of you all going and talking with folks that are more senior and established in those things, coming back to Max and Shanti's in an open discussion with them. One of the things that came up was they have these Community Health Innovation Awards, and most of these grants go to small nonprofits, small agencies that don't do research. They are very connected to their why, they're very connected to their community, but they really don't have much experience in doing research. So one of the questions that came up from them when talking about kind of what we do on Friday mornings and with our group was, is there capacity that they're always struggling to find mentors for these CHIA award grantees? I mean, so one of the questions that came up, and again, it gets to kind of being outside of your comfort zone, not reaching out to the bigwig PI or their people, but going out to the boots on the ground that are getting funding through this mechanism to do this work that matters to them. But just to kind of plant a seed is a question of, you know, would some of you guys have interest or bandwidth to consider engaging, you know, as there's fit, as there's, you know, interest, some of these community agencies? Just trying to operationalize concretely opportunity, and like just in terms of having these connections and discussions, you know, and just thinking about if they're, you know, it's so hard with our day-to-day struggles, but, you know, would there be time if someone's doing a community garden, someone is doing, you know, work around nutrition and obesity and you know, or something related to, there may be opportunities for those that have interest down the road, I think, in a partnership with some of these CHIA grants that could provide opportunities to get out there and really talk to some of these folks that are on the ground in the community and give back in a different way.
So I want to just build on the elephant and the dog point of view. And so this is what's really, if we go out into the community, we have to have mutual respect for what's important to them. They're elephants. And we're going to be very frustrated because we want them to act, well, that's not a question I want to solve, or that's not we can't do it this way, we have to do it this way. That has killed more of our relationships with the community because, oh, we just want you guys to come and volunteer for our clinical trials. We have to be willing to go into the community with mutual respect. It's an elephant. All right, so how can I help the elephant achieve its dreams? Not how will the elephant serve me and what I need. And it's really tough. So I hear from faculty, senior faculty that have labs and are trying to run labs, complain about the people in their labs all the time. Oh, I wish so-and-so was more like this, this, and this. I wish they behaved this way. I'm like, whoa. Your job is to help so-and-so develop their dreams. You know, so you need to be changing your mindset. And, you know, it's when you talk to people this way, but I personally cannot stand it. Boy, I wish Mike would just, you know, behave the way I want him to. No. I mean, what's important to Mike and how do I help him achieve his dreams?
You just want to piggyback on something you said multiple times, and that is get out of the comfort zone and just go and meet someone. Have a day trip, field trip, follow someone, it's going to be fun. And there was absolute silence for about 30 seconds after you said that. So I think the task is do that, send that message out, inviting an email to someone you want to meet, or seek some warm introductions. I think those warm introductions are very helpful, because otherwise, if I receive another email from another undergrad at UAB who wants to sort of follow the career of medicine, I mean, it's just hard because we do receive those sort of emails often. And yes, I want to help, but those warm introductions, being respectful of the time and hanging out with each other is helpful. So Thank you for those suggestions.
You know what? It's only painful the first time. So the second time, once your emotional system realizes that you're not dead after trying to do this, then the second time is easier. And the second time, the third time is even easier. And then it just becomes part of who you are to be curious and want to say, hey, can I come hang out with you for a little while? No? Okay, I understand you're busy. That's fine. Well, maybe some other time. But it's, it's kind of like working out. Can you run a marathon? No, but you can, you can start jogging maybe around your block. And then, getting to the second block gets easier, and then the third block. So the way you do it is, once again, I can tell you what to do all day long. But the way you actually do it is try it. Get out there.
And I think there's a perception that if you don't keep your head down, think bad things are going to happen. I've done some very crazy things, and so far, some of them led to stuff, and some of them didn't. I spent my first year, I was just here for a couple months. I spent a week hanging out backstage with Cirque du Soleil. I wasn't really led to anything, but it was fun. I learned some stuff. I love Cirque du Soleil.
You probably learned a lot about organization.
It was, it was totally different. Yeah. I mean, we were doing a research study. I was running a pilot study there, but it's not, you don't do that research. It's just hey, you want to come to Las Vegas for a week? And it's so, I mean, I think people feel like if you don't stay on this narrow path, I don't think that's actually true most of the time. I mean, you don't want to go off in a million different directions, but why not?
Great.
Good.